Smooth-On offers a wide range of materials that are great for making two-part molds. In this demonstration, we'll be using MoldStar 16 Fast Platinum Cure Silicone Rubber to make a mold of this three-dimensional metal cold cast art piece. For this project, we'll start with Sculptex clay to create the clay bed for the model. Next, we'll use MoldStar 16 Fast Silicone Rubber for the mold. We'll apply Ease Release 200 to ensure the two halves separate cleanly. Finally, Smoothcast 325 with nickel silver real metal powder will be cast into the mold to create an exact reproduction of the model. Here's a list of all the materials needed for this project. Let's start preparing our model for molding. The first step is embedding half of our model into clay. For this, we're using Sculptex, a sulfur-free, oil-based clay. We start by cutting the clay into manageable pieces and building it up around our model. The more time and care we put into keeping a clean seam line at this stage, the less cleanup we'll have to do later, and the nicer our final casting will look. With a sculpting tool, we refine the edge around the model, making sure it's neat and creating a tight seal so silicone can't seep underneath. Next, we'll create a pour spout. This is where we'll later introduce the casting resin into the mold. To do this, we use the end of a plastic funnel. We dig a small channel in the clay at an ideal entry point. Fill the inside of the spout so silicone won't flow inside, position the funnel, and secure it with more clay. Using our wooden sculpting tool, we make sure the seam around the spout is sharp and clean. Any excess clay can be trimmed away with a metal spatula or a straight edge tool. To prepare for mold walls, we use a framing square to create a level straight edge all the way around the clay base. For the walls, we're using clear acrylic so we can see inside during the pour. Hot melt glue keeps the walls in place, and we run a bead of glue along the joints where the walls meet, sealing them to prevent leaks. With our sculpting tool, we check the seam where the clay meets the acrylic to make sure it's sealed tightly. Now we need to create registration keys. These will lock the two halves of the mold together and help keep them aligned during casting. You can buy key tools or make your own, as we have here. By pressing the tool into the clay, we leave a negative impression. Later, when the silicone is poured, it fills these impressions and forms positive keys. We place the keys strategically around the model, leaving about 3/4 of an inch of space between the keys and the model itself. There's no strict formula here. It's more of an art than a science. We want enough keys to keep the mold from shifting, but not so many that the halves are difficult to fit together. Once the clay and keys are finished, we're ready to pour the first half of the mold. For this, we're using MoldStar 16 Fast. We can estimate how much material is needed with the calculator on the Smooth-On website. Before dispensing, we pre-mix each part thoroughly with a flat stick, scraping the sides and bottom of the container. This step is critical. Skipping it can result in an improper cure, a sticky surface, surface imperfections and color streaks, or reduced tear strength and other physical properties. Next, we measure equal parts of A and B by volume, combine them in a mixing container, and mix thoroughly. For the best results, we recommend double mixing. After the first mix, transfer the material into a clean container and mix again. There's enough time to do this, but keep an eye on the clock. This material has a fast 6-minute pot life, so it must get mixed and poured before that time is up, or it'll begin to thicken and become unusable. We scrape the sides and bottom and make sure the color is uniform with no streaks. When pouring, we start at the lowest point of the clay and pour in a thin, steady stream, letting the silicone flow and rise around the model. We keep pouring in the same spot to minimize trapped air. We want the silicone to rise to about 1/2 inch above the highest point of the model. The first half is left to cure at room temperature for 30 minutes. Then, we can go ahead with the second half of the mold. Once cured, we remove the acrylic walls and carefully take away the clay, being sure not to disturb the model embedded in the silicone. Any excess clay can be scraped away with a sculpting tool or blown out with compressed air. You can store the clay for future use, but be sure to label it clearly as clay that's only for use with platinum silicones, as it could inhibit future molds if used with tin cured products. Now we reassemble the mold box with the acrylic walls and hot glue for the second pour. But before pouring the silicone, we apply a release agent, the Ease Release 200. We spray it on with a spray brush spray method for even coverage, making sure it doesn't pool. This is critical because silicone will bond to silicone if no release is used. We let the release dry for about 15 minutes. Then, just like before, we measure equal volumes of parts A and B and mix them using the double mix technique. Then, pour in a thin stream at the lowest point, allowing the silicone to rise evenly around the model in the first mold half. Again, we pour until it's about half an inch above the highest point. This cures in 30 minutes at room temperature. Once cured, the mold walls are removed, the edges trimmed for cleanup, and the two halves are separated. The original model is removed, and, as we can see, the mold star has captured every detail and is now ready for casting. To prepare for casting, we fit the mold halves together and hold them in place with rubber bands. For this demonstration, we're casting smooth cast 325 resin with nickel-silver real metal powder. We dust the inside of the mold with the powder and roll it around to coat the entire surface. Excess powder is poured out and saved for reuse. After pre-mixing both parts of the resin, equal volumes of the metal powder and smooth cast 325 Part B are measured first. Since Part A is moisture sensitive, it's kept closed until it's needed. The powder and Part B are combined and mixed thoroughly. Then, an equal volume of Part A is measured and added to the mixture. All three components are blended together until uniform, scraping the sides and bottom of the container. And even though Smoothcast 325 has a short pot life of 2.5 minutes, the double mix technique is still used to ensure a complete mix before pouring. Now we pour in the resin slowly through the pour spout, allowing it to fill the mold completely. Pouring in a steady, controlled stream helps air escape as the cavity fills. As the resin reaches the top, you can see bubbles pushing out through the pour spout. That's the trapped air being displaced. Once the mold is full, we tap and vibrate it lightly to help release any remaining bubbles. The resin cures in 10 minutes at room temperature. Once cured, we remove the rubber bands, separate the mold, and take out the casting. The flashing can be broken off or trimmed depending on thickness, and the pour spout cut away with a saw. To finish, we buff the surface with steel wool, which brings out the metallic shine of the casting. Finally, we can apply shoe polish to add depth and contrast. The result is a solid, detailed replica with the look and feel of real metal.